Hello, everyone, and welcome into the third episode of WST Deep Dive. My name is Connor. As always, I'm joined by Lyss today. And there was some big news in Jets land, so you could probably guess by the title of this video, by the news over the past week, who we're going to be talking about today, Brayden Yager. Before we do that, Lyss, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited that we have good news, fun news, something to talk about in August here. Like, I love the off season for a few different reasons, but I get bored in August. And, we had a Patrick Laine trade happen, which we obviously still care about. We had some extensions come in, and, there's always some conversations about the upcoming ones, training camp coming up. But then we got a nice trade that's, been a long time coming for Brayden Yager, which is Brayden with a Y, everybody. This is going to be one that's going to stump a lot of people. We have the Shifleys and all that out there. Brayden Yager, Brayden with a Y. I think his last name starts with a Y. Brayden with a Y. That we got something fresh to talk about here in August.
Yeah, and this trade, like you said, late August, almost came at perfect timing. It feels like we're ramping up to NHL training camp, and this is the perfect bridge for us to talk about something. Brayden Yager traded to the Winnipeg Jets for Rutger McGroarty. He's from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, a Western Canadian prospect. He's a center slash right winger, right shot. He plays center with Moose Jaw in the WHL, but could play right wing at the NHL level. That's why I kind of kept that caveat there. I have him listed at 6 foot, 170 pounds. Depending on where you look, he's 179 pounds somewhere. He's 165 pounds somewhere. This is a common thing with prospects. It's just kind of the listings are all over the place. Even the 6 foot, somewhere he's 6'1", some places he's 5'11". Let's just go right in the middle for all of them. 6 foot, 170. He was the 2023 14th overall pick. Rutger McGroarty obviously being the 2022 14th overall pick, so just 1 year later. And because of that, Rutger's 20. Brayden Yager, he's 19 years old, currently playing with the Moose Jaw Warriors in the WHL.
Yeah, the 2023 draft class is a ton of fun, and there's a lot to like about a lot of the players. You kind of in and around Brayden Yager and the conversation surrounding him, obviously with that draft class, but also with the Moose Jaw Warriors. For those of you who don't know, they did win the WHL this year. Last year, we saw Brad Lambert win with the Seattle Thunderbirds, and then this year, Brayden Yager was representing, the Prairie Provinces at the Memorial Cup in Saginaw, which was really exciting. And he had some really fantastic teammates that he played with in Moose Jaw, as teams often do when they make it to the Memorial Cup. Names that Winnipeg Jets fans would know. Matt Savoy is a big one. Winnipeg Jets fans obviously would know the Winnipeg Ice from when they played here. And Matt Savoy was a big name that, was really popular and drew a big crowd when the Ice were here. But also guys like Jagger Firkus and Denton Matejchuk, who were, World Junior stars and played really fantastic hockey in the WHL and Memorial Cup this year. He's had some really awesome talent that he's been able to play with, and things might look a little bit different this coming year because those guys are mostly 2022 draft class players. So had some really great talent to work with here in Moose Jaw, and so there are a lot of good highlights and clips that you can check out on YouTube from his time with Moose Jaw.
So, Lyss, with the trade over the past week, Brayden Yager, I'll be the first to admit, I didn't keep much tabs on him when he was a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins during the 2023 draft. But now that he's a member of the Winnipeg Jets, with the trade over the past weekend and into this week, what are maybe some of your first impressions of the prospect as you kind of dive into his strengths, weaknesses? What are your first impressions reading articles on him and things of that nature?
I have a ridiculous amount to say about this player, and we're going to talk about him. And I think what I want to start with, though, is I have scraped the internet to watch game-by-game breakdowns of him, and I tried to read as much as I could. This is just an interesting guy. And I've said in previous episodes, I talk about it pretty frequently, I love players who are polarizing, who have a thing that makes them so amazing and the thing that's, kind of terrible and they have to compensate for it. It makes them fun to watch. This is a player who is what a lot of people would consider to be a Swiss Army knife prospect. He's got a lot going on. Some good, some bad, but everything is accounted for when you look at this player. And it makes it more difficult for a video like this that, does well when you dive into really specific parts of a player's game. There are a lot of parts of this player's game that are worth talking about. So we're going to try and cover as many of them as we can over the course of this clip.
Yeah, and here's the Elite Prospects card from when he was drafted. It's draft year in 2023. And as you can see, they kind of grade all of his skill sets and tools as a prospect. And if you're grading from 1 to 10, he's not below average at anything. He's a 6 out of 10 skater, 7 out of 10 shooter, and he's above 5 in everything else, not below 5 in anything. So my first thought when seeing these cards, reading articles about Brayden Yager, you can't find much negative out there about him. My first thought with prospects like that is always, oh, he has a high floor. Like this player will become an NHL player. That's always my thought personally. And this kind of card from Elite Prospects, great kind of visual here from his draft year, kind of enforces that. But we will talk a little bit more about what he has to improve on if he does want to make maybe the NHL this season or next year as a 19 or 20-year-old.
So one thing that you'll definitely notice on that card that we showed and some of the other media that we'll show over the course of the video, offense is definitely a big selling factor for this kid. As it is with most high round draft pick forwards, a lot of them are quite strong offensively. For Brayden Yager, this comes in the form of, some playmaking, some shooting, some creation. Like there's a lot, right? And you'll see this as a continued pattern over the course of this video, that there's a lot of everything. You saw that versatile box on that Elite Prospects card. We're going to keep coming back to it because this is a player that does a lot of stuff. And we mentioned before that he had some really talented players that he played with in Moose Jaw. So his role kind of on that team was just to put pucks in the net. And what that looked like, specifically when playing with a guy like Denton Matejchuk, who is a Columbus Blue Jackets prospect who is known for being a really strong power play quarterback, it was feed me the puck, dude, and I'll do my best to get that in the net. And his shot is quite excellent. And I think Jets fans will be excited about that, and we'll have some, good comparisons to make, because his shot comes with some shades of Colby Barlow, right? There is a similarity in kind of the way these guys shoot, a little bit less of the curl and drag that Connor has so eloquently described in our previous video diving into Colby Barlow, but he has that same shot, the same snap, and also that comfort from shooting it from his feet. This is a World Junior snapshot that we have here of this puck coming in across the ice here, and he's able to shoot this puck and score here. He is very comfortable shooting, and that makes him a very interesting offensive prospect to have, because he has some versatility when it comes to the playmaking, but also is no one to snuff at when it comes to taking that shot and putting pucks in the net.
Yeah, and I like that you drew the comparison there to Colby Barlow. I'll say my story again for people that maybe didn't check out the first episode of WST Deep Dive. But the curl and drag, it's taking over the NHL. The reason it's so effective is not only can you curl and drag it around defenders to kind of open up more space for yourself, but it's also decepting goaltenders as well, and kind of the angles. We know how crazy goaltenders are about the angles, positioning. It's changing the angle for them as well. So it gives you an advantage in the shot department. And Brayden Yager, while it's not as much of a drag as Colby Barlow, who really drags it into his feet, it is still there. It's a little deceptive. And if you ask a lot of the scouts, if you read a lot of the articles on Brayden Yager, the shot is his number one selling feature. We talked about the versatility and kind of the high floor, and he's good at a lot of things offensively, but the shot is what gives him maybe the biggest advantage over defenders and goaltenders in the WHL. 35 goals for Moose Jaw last year, 60 assists. Those 60 assists probably came a lot with playing on a really good team. 95 points in 57 games. So this is a player that can fill the back of the net, like you said, Liz, and his shot is a big reason to do with that.
He's massive on the power play. That's a huge aspect of this player as well, that is able to manage the space that's created for him by playing 5-on-4 hockey. Lots of power play points from this guy from playing with some strong players, and for creating some space there too, which is really interesting. We love guys who know how to work on the power play here in Winnipeg. We know that that's been an area of contention for a lot of Jets fans over the past couple of years, and you're always looking for guys who are really able to capitalize on that advantage. And this is a player who comes with a little bit of a history of being able to make the power play work. So it'll be interesting to see how he integrates into the Winnipeg Jets system in whatever capacity that looks like over training camp in the next couple of years, and see if he can bring some of those power play skills to the team.
And while scoring on the power play is great, and like you said, that's something that will translate to the NHL level, and the Winnipeg Jets would very much welcome that if it did, there is a little bit of concern there. I brought up the 95 points in the 57 games, and that's a great number when looking at it without any context behind it. But Liz, you brought your art skills back to the show. This is my favorite part of WST Deep Dive. Let's bring up the graphic. There is a little bit of concern here with the power play points and the percentage of a player's points that come on the power play. I'll let you dive into this a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first one to say it. I disregard points as a statistic for players more quickly than most people do. I actually made a tweet about it the other day, and a lot of people were like, this is the first time I've ever seen this argument framed in this way, and it's actually kind of fascinating. Where if you look at a player, points, and say, it takes about 10 seconds to score a goal kind of thing, like this guy, you're catching about 3% of his full sample size if you just look at the points, right? There's a lot that goes on in hockey outside of when the points are scored. But a guy like Brayden Yager, even just looking at when the points are scored, you could see on this graph here that he scores a lot of his points on the power play. So you can look at that from a positive angle, like we did about he's able to capitalize and take advantage of what is considered to be an advantage for teams. But if you look at guys who, you can see my little descriptions here of why I chose these comparables. there are not a lot of hockey players that at a high level score almost half of their points on the power play. If you are someone who is able to produce, you are able to do so at 5-on-5 as well. So there have been some concerns raised by some of the people I've spoken with in some scouting circles. I tried to reach out to anyone in my network who knew anything about WHL hockey, Pittsburgh Penguins hockey, just to get some more info on this character and this player as a whole. And there were some concerns about a little bit of the power play merchant-esque play that they've seen from him with playing with Denton Matejchuk for most of his junior career, a player who's so good at placing pucks and, you know, being able to capitalize on that is a skill, but it's also something that inflates these point totals a little bit more than maybe some of the other comparables that have similar point totals in junior hockey in that 2023 draft class. So it's nothing to necessarily shoot up any red flags or, you know, scream and cry about, but it is something just interesting to point out. We'll get to an NHL card comparable later, but there have been shades of Travis Konecny in this player that people have spoken about, and that's a guy who doesn't even score a quarter of his points in the power play, right? So just some food for thought that we thought we'd bring up in this one to talk about how that Swiss Army knife, that versatility, and the little bit of everything from this player can also be perceived in a little bit of a let's just watch out for this one sort of way.
Yeah, and I think the power play stuff as well. I think a big part of that, and maybe this is true for Brayden Yager, maybe it's not, but players I feel that do score a large portion of their points on the power play are really good when there is open space. And when they predominantly score their points on the power play, it's almost that they struggle to create space at 5-on-5 for themselves, that same space that is there at 5-on-4. We have a little bit more to say about that in a second here. And here we have an example of that happening in a game with Moose Jaw against the Winnipeg Ice. Yeah, Liz covers her eyes. But anyways, here's an example. I brought it up just before we transitioned there, but when he predominantly scores the majority of his points on the power play, it might be part of a bigger story that maybe he struggles to create space at 5-on-5. And this is an example. His winger is coming down the wing with the puck. Brayden Yager's trailing. He receives the puck and eventually shoots this puck right around the ringette line there in a prime scoring area, but he's not the one that created that space. So this is something to watch for going forward. I don't know if we can label it as a weakness that he fails to create space offensively, but if wingers and maybe play drivers are constantly doing the creating for him, he is dynamite with the puck on his stick, and we talked about the shot. And on the power play, when he has space, that is when he is the most dangerous. So maybe it's a play style compatibility thing that we talked about with Colby Barlow and Brad Lambert, where he's going to have to play with a player like a Nikolai Ehlers, who is dynamite at creating space in the offensive zone and can set up these players. Because when he has the space, he's really, really dangerous with the puck on his stick. But sometimes he struggles to create that space and benefits a lot from his wingers doing that job for him.
He's such a fascinating player because he isn't a role guy in the same way that other guys are. You know, Colby Barlow comes onto a team, they're going to say, okay, what can we do to make Colby Barlow shoot the puck? Brayden Yager's the type of guy who comes into a team, and there are other guys on the team that say, okay, what are we going to do to make sure that Denton Matejchuk is able to be a proper power play quarterback, right? He's the guy who fits into those slots that you need in order to build up the rest of your supporting cast. And what that means, though, is that sometimes these guys, though they are versatile, though they're able to contribute exactly the way the team needs them, if that need shifts a little bit, they can become invisible really, really quickly. And that is a common theme that I heard from some of the people that I was talking to. You know, someone brought up a chart they were showing me from their kind of private database of things. And there was some random game from this year where Moose Jaw had 31 scoring chances and he was only part of 2, not even created 2. He was only part of 2, because that's just kind of the way things go when you're a player who's kind of being asked to or being put in a position to kind of respond to the other players around you. So I think he has the toolbox to come in and be a super valuable piece to kind of plug into a lineup that you have of a team like the Winnipeg Jets that has a lot of guys who are really good at certain things and really bad at others to really balance that out. But junior players have really different teams year over year. Their coaching staff changes. They play on different teams. Like the 3 years that we've seen of this kid being a full-time WHLer have all looked very different. So his role has looked very different because that's what's being asked of him. So I'm very intrigued by how things are going to look for him this year in Moose Jaw. If he's even going to stick around in Moose Jaw, he's the type of guy I could see being good trade bait going forward. So it's just a very interesting sort of situation. And I know that's probably not the answer a lot of Jets fans are looking for. You want to hear us say, he is great at this, he sucks at this, and you should watch for this. It's a lot more complicated with this prospect. It's a lot more interesting. It makes watching his games really, really, really cool. And it also makes us really, really excited about what we could possibly see from him next.
So now it's time to get into what to look for going in the short term and the long term for Brayden Yager as a prospect. As for this upcoming season, like you said, maybe trade bait for Moose Jaw in the WHL, but it is either the WHL or the Winnipeg Jets for Brayden Yager. Very similar to the situation that Colby Barlow is in. As a 19-year-old, they're not 20 yet, so they're therefore ineligible to play with the Manitoba Moose in the AHL. But we were pouring through some of the media on Twitter when the trade broke, and from hockeyprospecting.com, they labeled his NHL comparable as a prospect to Travis Konecny. And Konecny has gone on to have a great NHL career so far, but you see the card here on the screen, very similar the first 3 years of that development for Konecny, 2014, 15, and 16. For Yager, the last 3 years as a prospect. This is a very interesting comparison, and we talked about the shot and the offensive upside that he has. Maybe he has issues creating space. Konecny doesn't really have that issue in the NHL. Maybe that's something he developed as he became a upper echelon player in the league. But this is a positive sign for Brayden Yager being compared to a player like Travis Konecny. I brought up the high floor. A lot of scouts that I've talked to as well kind of label Brayden Yager as a middle six player in the NHL. Travis Konecny is a bona fide top six player. So to be compared to a player like that in the NHL, that's huge. And if Brayden Yager can get to that level, that'll be an absolute win for the Jets. Play styles, I think, are very similar as well. Brayden Yager it's not really viewed as a weakness. His physicality, that is kind of viewed as a positive as well. Like, this player kind of really has it all, especially in the offensive end, like we talked about earlier with his shot and his playmaking. Maybe he lacks the ability to create space, but Travis Konecny, hockeyprospecting.com, shout out to them for that card and providing us with that comparable. Lyss, is there anything that you're watching for Brayden Yager this next year, either with the Winnipeg Jets, which is a bit of a long shot, but most likely with the Moose Jaw Warriors in the WHL?
Yeah, listen, I think Winnipeg Jets fans should look for an outside chance that he does make the Winnipeg Jets this year, simply because this is a type of player who has not the same weaknesses as other players who would struggle to make the team early on, which is typically the foot speed, right? Yes. We see that it's difficult for players to make NHL rosters, make that NHL adjustment. Sorry to say, Cole Perfetti is one of those examples where he was such a dominant junior player, and we could talk a lot about how his NHL career has gone so early, but the foot speed, if Cole Perfetti was just a little bit faster, I think he'd be, second best player on the Winnipeg Jets sort of thing. Like, it's definitely something that makes the jump to the NHL easier. If I had to put money on it, I would put a lot of money on Brayden Yager not making the Jets, but I'm just saying, hey, it's exciting. Watch for it. We'll see what happens. But I've said the word before, and I'm going to say it 1,000 times more. I am fascinated by this player. I'm so interested to watch him because, like we said, like, all of the articles that you've read about this kid, like, he's the type of guy to show up at the coach's office 3 hours before the game and be like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I think that's kind of why he's become the sort of player that doesn't have a thing per se, because he just wants to help the team win, which is a really exciting trait to have. But looking at how Moose Jaw's roster is set up this year, what he needs to do to make that team win is going to be the all-star. So if his coach asks him to be the all-star and that's what he wants to do in order to help his team win, I think this is going to be a really telling year for what we have in this prospect. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think if Winnipeg Jets fans have the chance to go watch the WHL somewhere, whether they can go to Brandon or if you guys are located elsewhere, I highly recommend it because I think it's going to be really interesting. At the end of the day, prospects are lottery tickets. We talk about this all the time. This one, more than anything, we have no idea what he will actually look like at the NHL level, just because he is such a versatile player that has kind of changed and grown and, has certain areas that are better than others, weaker than others, but kind of very temperate in a lot of different areas. So I'm just so excited to watch how the next year goes. I will be sitting on the edge of my seat to see how things work out for him in Moose Jaw. He's a surefire player that will be making the World Junior roster over Christmas time this year. There's a lot to watch. Who knows? And if Moose Jaw, if he doesn't get traded and that team finishes the Memorial Cup run early, which I assume they will, maybe he'll get a shot to play the end of the season with the Moose. All in all, going to be a really interesting year to watch this player. Jets fans should be excited. Jets fans should want him to have some areas that really kind of come out of the woodwork and really shine as a player, because I think that's going to be his best chance of making the Jets in the next couple of years. But I'm just very interested to see how this is going to work out for him.
Yeah, and whether it's with Moose Jaw or the Winnipeg Jets, what I'm most looking forward to watching with him this season is, can he beat teams in multiple ways? If he has to be the star for Moose Jaw, can he beat a team having 3 points at even strength? Can he beat a team being the play driver? Can he beat a team being the power play shot specialist and having half of his points come from the power play? Like, he's a Swiss Army knife player, and we've noted that, and he's been that throughout his career, but can he elevate being that and beat teams in multiple ways on any given night? That, I think, will really raise his floor even higher as a prospect and even raise his ceiling to that Travis Konechny level. Again, Travis Konechny is a great NHL player. That would be an absolute best case scenario for Brayden Yager, but the play styles are similar, very similar to the Barzal-Lambert comparison that we made on the WST Deep Dive
2015 draft class. 2. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
What are we saying? Yeah, exactly. Well, that's going to do it for episode 3 of WST Deep Dive. So glad we could throw this together with the trade happening last week. As always, we are open to any and all discussion on any of these prospects, so drop a comment down below. Maybe one aspect of Brayden Yager's game that you really like that we didn't talk about, or one weakness that we didn't touch on either. We always want to hear from you guys. Drop a comment below. While you're down there, hit the like, the subscribe, and the notification bell. Got a ton of great content coming out as we near Winnipeg Jets training camp. It's right around the corner, so make sure you're hitting the notification bell and you're not missing anything. From Lyss and I, thank you for checking it out, and we will see you on the next episode of WST Deep Dive.